So this gets us to a second topic, that is biochemical mechanisms of cell injury. Now before I even start with the biochemical mechanisms, tell me this, which is the most common cause? Which is the most common cause of cell injury? Most common cause of cell injury, it is ischemia, that is reduced blood supply to the affected organ. Most common cause is ischemia, which is reduced blood supply. अच्छा, again पहले मुझे ये बताओ, what is the difference between ischemia and hypoxia? Hypoxia is reduced oxygen delivery versus ischemia, which is reduced blood supply. Which is more severe in nature? Ischemia ज़्यादा severe है, ischemia is more severe या hypoxia? Ischemia is more severe क्योंकि hypoxia is reduced oxygen. In ischemia, along with reduced oxygen, even the nutrients are not able to reach the affected organ. So ischemia is more severe. Next point. Other causes of cell injury are, it can be associated with chemical injury. It can be chemical injury. Infections. Other causes of cell injury, they are not important. Chemical injury, infections, nutritional imbalance, that is protein energy malnutrition, not having a proper diet, nutritional imbalance, genetics, genetic factors, genetics or physical agents, These are the other causes of cell injury, most common cause of which is ischemia. Next point. Now, which is in cell injury? अब cell injury हुई है. Which is the first organelle affected in cell injury? The first organelle affected in cell injury is mitochondria. First organelle affected is mitochondria. What is the role of mitochondria in the body? Mitochondria, it is the powerhouse of the cell. That is, it is associated with generation of ATP. It is the powerhouse of the cell. So I can safely say कि first biochemical feature associated with cell injury is reduced ATP. First biochemical feature is ATP starts reducing within seconds. Next point. What is the effect of reduced ATP? ठीक है, I fully agree that ATP starts reducing. Reduced ATP in turn reduces the action of sodium-potassium ATPase pump. It reduces the action of sodium-potassium ATPase pump. You only tell me this. You know this from physiology. Sodium कहाँ ज़्यादा है? Where is sodium more? Intracellularly, extracellularly? Sodium is more extracellularly. Potassium is more intracellularly. This sodium-potassium imbalance is maintained by sodium-potassium ATPase pump. This sodium-potassium ATPase pump needs ATP. In cell injury, ATP reduces, so the work of this pump or the efficacy of this pump reduces. In turn leads to influx of sodium extracellularly ज़्यादा था. अगर ATP नहीं है तो it causes influx of sodium and water, influx of potassium, influx of sodium and water and efflux of potassium. Potassium was more intracellularly. This was maintained by ATP. अगर ATP कम हो गया तो efflux of potassium. Next point. So I can safely say that the first microscopic feature of cell injury is, answer, it is associated with influx of water, that is cellular swelling. First microscopic feature being cellular swelling. These 3 points are very, very important. First organelle affected, mitochondria. First biochemical feature, reduced ATP. First microscopic feature, cellular swelling. Nothing is to be ratified in this. Just go in a sequence and you will never forget it. अच्छा, मुझे एक चीज़ और बताओ. Tell me this also. Is it reversible or irreversible in nature? All these are the reversible changes. First feature है ना बच्चे. So these are reversible in nature. Next point. So this is where we start with biochemical mechanisms of cell injury. The first biochemical mechanism, this is where we start with biochemical mechanisms of cell injury. The first biochemical mechanism of cell injury is mitochondrial damage. First organelle to be affected is mitochondria. That is, it is associated with mitochondrial damage. Mitochondrial damage in turn leads to reduced ATP. एक तो ATP reduce हुआ, which has multiple downstream effects, reduced ATP, and it is also associated with increased reactive oxygen species. Reduced ATP and increased free radicals or reactive oxygen species. We'll be doing this much more in detail in just 2 minutes. Next, what does reduced ATP do? अब reduced ATP से शुरू करते हैं. What does reduced ATP do? If ATP reduces, it is associated with reduced activity of sodium potassium ATPase pump. We have just seen this, reduced activity of sodium potassium ATPase pump, which in turn causes influx of sodium and water, efflux of potassium, causing or leading to cellular swelling. Leading to cellular swelling. Reduced ATP. Next point, reduced ATP, it is also associated with DNA damage. Reduced ATP, it is also associated with DNA damage, which in turn can activate apoptosis. It is associated with DNA damage, in turn activating apoptosis. Next, the next biochemical mechanism of cell injury is influx of calcium. Calcium कहाँ पर ज़्यादा है? Calcium, it is more intracellularly, extracellularly. It is more extracellularly. Extracellular calcium is 10,000 times that of intracellular calcium. So if calcium is entering into the cell, influx of calcium leads to activation of numerous enzymes. Influx of calcium causes activation. It causes activation of numerous enzymes like ATPases. It causes activation of ATPases, endonucleases and phospholipases. It causes activation of ATPases, endonucleases and phospholipases. ATPase reduces the ATP. Endonucleases cause DNA damage versus phospholipases, which cause membrane damage. Which cause membrane damage. So influx of calcium is responsible for activation of enzymes, in turn leading to reduced ATP, DNA damage and membrane damage. On the other hand, influx of calcium, it also increases mitochondrial permeability. Further increasing the damage to the mitochondria. So it is a vicious cycle. First organelle to be affected was mitochondria. Mitochondria के affect होने से, because mitochondria was getting affected, ATP reduced, influx of calcium, cytoplasmic calcium increased, which in turn also increases mitochondrial permeability. It is a cycle. Next biochemical mechanism of cell injury. Is membrane damage. Next is membrane damage. In membrane damage, अब मैं membrane को 2 types में divide कर सकता हूँ. It can be plasma membrane damage. या तो plasma membrane का damage हुआ. It can be a plasma membrane damage, or it can be lysosomal membrane damage. Plasma membrane or lysosomal membrane damage. Plasma membrane is associated with loss of cellular components. It is associated with loss of cellular components. बहुत obvious है. अगर plasma membrane damage होती है So the cellular components are getting lost. Versus अगर lysosomal membrane damage होती है, in that case the lysosomal enzymes will get released into the cytoplasm. So lysosomal membrane damage causes enzymatic digestion. It causes enzymatic digestion, enzymatic digestion of cellular components. It causes enzymatic digestion of cellular components. So membrane damage, दो टाइप का membrane damage हो गया, plasma membrane versus lysosomal membrane damage. Lastly, the last biochemical mechanism of cell injury. Last biochemical mechanism is protein misfolding. If cell is getting injured, the proteins will get misfolded. Protein misfolding and DNA damage. Protein misfolding and DNA damage, which in turn activates apoptosis. So these are the biochemical mechanisms of cell injury. First was mitochondrial damage. Next, reduced ATP. Reduced ATP in turn leads to cellular swelling. You already know that this cellular swelling is the first microscopic feature. It is the first microscopic feature of cell injury. You know that, cellular swelling, reduced ATP. Next is increased cytosolic calcium. Influx of calcium means what is happening to cytoplasmic calcium? It is increasing. Increased cytosolic calcium, which in turn activates numerous enzymes as well as increases mitochondrial permeability. Membrane damage, which is divided into two parts, that is the plasma membrane damage versus lysosomal membrane, and lastly protein misfolding and DNA damage activating apoptosis. These are the biochemical mechanisms of cell injury. Next point. So this gets us to our next and one of the main topics in cell injury, that is free radicals and the microscopic features associated with the same. So let us first start with free radicals. What are they? देखो, the name tells you everything. Free radicals जैसे O2 minus superoxide anion. What is a free radical? Free radicals, these are substances with an unpaired electron. With an unpaired electron in outer orbit. अब जैसे O2 minus है, example of a free radical is O2 minus. Superoxide anion. So these are substances with an unpaired electron in outer orbit. Normally, number of electrons is equal to number of protons. The substances are charge neutral. If there is an unpaired electron in outer orbit, it is called as free radical. Are they less reactive or are they highly reactive? Free radicals, they are highly reactive in nature. अब हम लोग free radicals को will study it under two topics: generation of free radicals and removal of free radicals. Let us first start with generation of free radicals. Body में free radicals बन कैसे रहे हैं? How are they getting generated? Generation of free radicals. The first method of generation of free radicals, first is it is associated with partial oxidative phosphorylation. What does this mean? Partial oxidative phosphorylation. देखो, oxidative phosphorylation occurs in mitochondria. You know this. Oxidative phosphorylation is responsible for ATP synthesis. This is how ATP synthesis occurs in mitochondria. This is normal. But if this oxidative phosphorylation, if it is partial in nature, अगर ये partial है, if it is partial in nature, it leads to the formation of hydroxyl free radical. It leads to the formation of OH minus. That is hydroxyl free radical, leads to the formation of hydroxyl free radical. So partial oxidative phosphorylation. Agar oxidative phosphorylation, if it is partial in nature, it is associated with formation of hydroxyl free radical, which is the most potent free radical. This is an important MCQ. Please put a star on this. Which is the most potent or the most reactive free radical? Hydroxyl free radical. Next point. Next method of generation of free radicals is by inflammatory killing, is by the killing processes in inflammation. We'll be doing this in detail when we study inflammation. हम लोग इसे तब देखेंगे. But right now, just for completion sake, देखो killing, it occurs by two main pathways. That is the NADPH oxidase pathway. It occurs by two main pathways. That is NADPH oxidase pathway, also called as phagocyte oxidase pathway. NADPH oxidase or phagocyte oxidase pathway, and nitric oxide synthase pathway. Next is NOS, nitric oxide synthase pathway. So there are two main pathways of killing. NADPH oxidase pathway, it is associated with the formation of two free radicals, that is O2 minus, superoxide anion. ये दो free radicals बनाता है, superoxide anion and hypochlorous anion, HOCl minus, superoxide and hypochlorous anion. Not to worry, कैसे बनाता है, which are the steps associated, we'll do everything in the chapter inflammation. So NADPH oxidase pathway, we are right now doing generation of free radicals. Free radicals, they are generated by the process of killing. NADPH oxidase pathway, it formed two free radicals, hypochlorous anion and superoxide anion, versus nitric oxide synthase pathway, which is associated with the synthesis of ONOO minus, that is peroxynitride free radical, which is associated with peroxynitride. Which free radical is synthesized? Peroxynitride free radical. This is the second method of generation of free radicals. Next method of generation of free radicals is by transition metals. And the reaction that is used in transition metals. You know this. Iron containing free radical, उसमें कौन सा, what is the name of that reaction? Iron कैसे लिखते हैं? Fe ना? So it is called as Fenton's reaction. Transition metals, that is Fenton's reaction. This is about generation of free radicals. This was generation. So there were three methods of generation. Partial oxidative phosphorylation, which leads to the formation of hydroxyl free radical. It is the most potent free radical. और कौन से मेथड हैं? Killing, जैसे NADPH oxidase pathway, hypochlorous anion and superoxide anion, and nitric oxide synthase pathway, that is peroxynitride free radical. Lastly is transition metals, Fenton's reaction. This was generation of free radicals. And this gets us to the other side, that is removal of free radicals. This gets us to the other side, that is removal of free radicals. There are three main pathways by which free radicals are removed. Removal of free radicals. First, which is the most common method of removal of free radical? What is the basic property of free radicals? Free radicals, they are unstable, they are highly reactive, they are unstable, so they spontaneously decay. Removal of free radicals, most commonly they decay spontaneously. This is the most common method of removal, they decay spontaneously. Next method of removal of free radicals is the enzymatic method. Next method next method of removal of free radicals is the enzymatic method. Enzymatic method of removal of free radicals. कौन कौन से enzymes role play करते हैं? There are three main enzymes. There are three main enzymes associated, which are superoxide dismutase, SOD, SOD, that is superoxide. तीन main enzymes हैं बच्चे. पहला है SOD, that is superoxide dismutase, superoxide dismutase. Next is glutathione peroxidase, glutathione peroxidase and catalase, glutathione peroxidase, glutathione peroxidase and catalase. So there are three main enzymes which play a role in removal of free radicals. तीन main enzymes हैं, superoxide dismutase, glutathione peroxidase and catalase. Superoxide dismutase, SOD, superoxide dismutase, this plays a role in conversion of superoxide anion to H2O2. It converts a free radical, superoxide anion, O2 minus, superoxide anion to H2O2. This H2O2, this hydrogen peroxide, this H2O2 is converted to H2O plus O2. It is converted to H2O plus O2 by the action of glutathione peroxidase and catalase. Both of these, they convert H2O2 to H2O plus O2. Enzymatic removal. So superoxide dismutase converted superoxide anion O2 minus to H2O2. Glutathione peroxidase and catalase, इन्होंने H2O2 को convert किया. They converted H2O2 to H2O plus O2. This was enzymatic removal of free radicals. First method was they are inherently unstable, so they decay spontaneously. Next is enzymatic removal. अच्छा, before I go to the last method of removal of free radicals, superoxide dismutase के बारे में एक point और देखते हैं. I can divide superoxide dismutase into two types. Manganese superoxide dismutase दो type का है. MN, that is manganese superoxide dismutase and copper zinc superoxide dismutase. एंजाइम दो टाइप का है बच्चे, मैंगनीज सुपरऑक्साइड डिस्मुटेस एंड कॉपर जिंक सुपरऑक्साइड डिस्मुटेस. एम से मैंगनीज सुपरऑक्साइड डिस्मुटेस, it is present in mitochondria versus copper zinc versus C से copper zinc superoxide dismutase which is present in cytoplasm. This is just a technicality. Even if it is not asked in your exam in so much of detail, but you need to know कि enzymatic removal तीन enzymes से था, superoxide dismutase, glutathione peroxidase and catalase. This was enzymatic removal of free radicals. And lastly, the last method of removal of free radicals is non-enzymatic removal. Lastly is non-enzymatic removal of free radicals. Non-enzymatic removal में again, non-enzymatic removal, the first is vitamins. All the girls, which you keep yourself extremely fresh and beautiful with the use of creams. So creams, I mean, I'm sure girls know this. Creams में which vitamins are present? Vitamins A, C and D. Vitamins A, C and D. This is non-enzymatic removal. Next, Asha, now again you tell me this. Which is the transport form of iron? Ferrous या ferric? We'll do that when we study RBC disorders in hematology. We will see कि ferric, Fe3+, ferric is the transport form of iron. That means it is getting transported in blood, it is bound to which protein? Bound to serum transferrin. So non-enzymatic removal of free radicals, non-enzymatically ferric को किसने remove किया? Serum transferrin ने. Next, which is the transport form of copper? Cu2+, copper, which is getting transported in blood, bound to serum ceruloplasmin. So ceruloplasmin is helping in non-enzymatic removal of free radicals. And lastly is transferrin. We have seen transferrin, which is the storage form of iron. Storage form of iron, that is ferritin. Storage form of iron, that is ferritin. That is ferritin. So these are the substances which play a role in non-enzymatic removal of free radicals. क्या क्या देखा आपने? Vitamins A, C and E. Next, ferric, transport form of iron, that is it is getting transported bound to serum transferrin. Copper, serum ceruloplasmin. And lastly, the storage form of iron, that is ferritin. So this was biochemical mechanisms of cell injury. There were 5 main biochemical mechanisms. First organelle affected was mitochondria. First biochemical feature was reduced ATP, occurring within seconds. First microscopic feature was cellular swelling. Next point. So this gets us to cell injury, the microscopic features associated. So let us have a look, which this gets us to our next topic in cell injury, that is morphological features, morphological alterations in cell injury. This gets us to morphological alterations in cell injury. Now I can divide cell injury. I can divide cell injury into 2 types, reversible and irreversible. सबसे पहले let us start with reversible cell injury. Let us start with reversible cell injury. Reversible cell injury, you already know this. The first microscopic feature, let me write this 1 2 3 करके. The first microscopic feature, first or the earliest microscopic feature of reversible cell injury is cellular swelling. We have already seen this, you know this. Next point, this cellular swelling क्यों हो रहा है? Why is cellular swelling occurring? Because of influx of water. Water is entering into the cell, leading to cellular swelling. This in turn leads to blebbing. Blunting and loss of microvilli. This leads to blebbing, blunting and loss of microvilli. इसका क्या मतलब है? देखो, if this is the plasma membrane of the cell, these are the microvilli which are present. These are the microvilli. अगर water enter हो गया, if there is cellular swelling, it leads to a bleb formation. Water enter हुआ तो it leads to the formation of a cytoplasmic bleb. Blebbing, blunting. अगर एक cytoplasmic bleb बना तो microvilli will get blunted. Blebbing, blunting and loss of microvilli. Next point, reversible cell injury. Same thing. All the points are the same. Cellular swelling हो रहा है ना? So it is associated with dilatation of endoplasmic reticulum. It is associated with dilatation of endoplasmic reticulum and detachment of polysomes. It is associated with detachment of endoplasmic reticulum, dilatation of endoplasmic reticulum and detachment of polysomes. Lastly, put a star, very, very important. Reversible cell injury. It is also associated with accumulation of small amorphous densities. It is associated with accumulation of small amorphous densities in mitochondria, which is बहुत important है. Accumulation of small amorphous densities in mitochondria. देखो, if the amorphous density is small, अगर amorphous density small है, then it is a reversible cell injury. Accumulation of small amorphous densities. अगर amorphous density small है, then it is reversible cell injury. Versus if the amorphous density is large, if it is a large amorphous density, then it is irreversible cell injury. Same thing. If the amorphous density if the amorphous density is large, if it is a large amorphous density, then it is irreversible cell injury. Now my question to you is, small or large नहीं लिखा है, only amorphous density लिखा हुआ है. It is just written presence of amorphous densities in mitochondria. What will you mark? Reversible या irreversible? सिर्फ amorphous density लिखा है. It is irreversible cell injury. क्योंकि amorphous density large भी हो सकती है ना. Throughout MBBS, we always go for the worst case scenario. Small है तो reversible, large है तो reversible. If nothing is written, we'll go for irreversible cell injury. Next point. So these are the microscopic features of reversible cell injury. A very, very important slide. Versus this gets us to the other side. This gets us to the other side, that is irreversible cell injury. This gets us to the other side, that is irreversible cell injury. Irreversible cell injury. Again, you know this. Which is the first organelle affected in cell injury? Mitochondria. So which will be the first feature of irreversible cell injury? सबसे पहले क्या नजर आएगा? Mitochondrial damage. That is, on electron microscopy, it is associated with accumulation of amorphous densities. I'm not writing the word large now. You know this. It is associated with accumulation of amorphous densities. Accumulation of amorphous densities in mitochondria. Pehla point. It is associated with amorphous densities in mitochondria. Next point. It is irreversible cell injury, but it is also associated with nuclear changes. Now, there are three main nuclear changes associated. That is pycnosis. 3 nuclear changes hai. That is pycnosis, karyorrhexis, and karyolysis. Pycnosis, karyorrhexis, and karyolysis. What does this mean? Pycnosis मतलब chromatin condense हो गया है. Pycnosis, chromatin condensation. Pycnosis, that is chromatin condensation. Next is karyorrhexis. Pycnosis, chromatin condensation. Karyorrhexis, पहले तो chromatin condense हुआ. Karyorrhexis मतलब fragmentation. Nucleus टूटकर बिखर गया. Fragmentation of the nucleus. Karyorrhexis, that is fragmentation of the nucleus. And lastly is karyolysis, that is dissolution of the nucleus. Karyolysis, that is dissolution of the nucleus. So nuclear changes, chromatin condensed, fragmented, and dissolved. Pycnosis, karyorrhexis, and karyolysis. These are the nuclear changes associated with irreversible cell injury. And lastly, I want you to tell me this. What will happen to basophilia and eosinophilia? Nucleus is blue in a cell. Nucleus क्या है? Nucleus is blue. Nucleus condense होके fragmented and dissolved. So basophilia reduces. Versus eosinophilia, which increases. These are the morphological features of reversible and irreversible cell injury. Now, irreversible cell injury occurred by 2 patterns, necrosis and apoptosis. So let us start with our first pattern of irreversible cell injury, that is necrosis. Let us start with our first pattern, that is necrosis.